So, the teacher asks the class to make up a sentence beginning with I. She goes around the class getting the predictive, I have a cat. I went to the shops. I have a bicycle, etc. She comes to Wee Mary, who begins, I is. At that, the teacher cuts Wee Mary off and interrupts, saying, I am. Wee Mary gives her a sideways glance, sighs, and begins again. I is. Again, the teacher cuts her off and snaps back, Mary, it's I am. Wee Mary sighs and exasperated restarts and says, I am the 9th letter of the alphabet. I'll get my coat. An old lady was very upset as her husband Albert had just passed away. She went to the undertaker's to have one last look at her dearly departed husband. The instant she saw him, she started crying. The mortician walked over to comfort her. Through her tears, she explained that she was upset because her dearest Albert was wearing a black suit, and it was his fervent wish to be buried in a blue suit. The mortician apologized and explained that traditionally they always put bodies in a black suit, but he'd see what he could arrange. The next day, she returned to the funeral parlor to have one last moment with Albert before the funeral the following day. When the mortician pulled back the curtain, she managed to smile through her tears as Albert was resplendent in a smart blue suit. She said to the mortician, Wonderful, wonderful, but where did you get that beautiful suit? Well, yesterday afternoon after you left, a man about your husband's size was brought in and he was wearing a blue suit, the mortician replied. His wife was quite upset because she wanted him buried in the traditional black suit. Albert's wife smiled at the undertaker. After that, he continued, it was just a matter of swapping the heads. I asked my wife, Sweetheart, why are you pointing your legs at the ceiling like that? She says, You wouldn't understand, babe, it's called yoga. This position is the candle. I pause, then ask, And does the fact you just farted have anything to do with it? She snaps back, Yeah, it's a scented candle, a-hole. Now leave me alone. Two friends were invited to a costume party, but with a twist. Everyone had to come dressed as an emotion. The first guy shows up wearing mismatched clothes, holding a broken umbrella, and looking totally miserable. The second guy arrives in a yellow shirt, a chef's hat, and he's carrying a giant bowl of pudding. The host opens the door and looks at them, confused. What are you two supposed to be? The first guy says, I'm deep in despair. The second guy grins and says, And I'm disgusted. One day, a blonde walked into a doctor's office with both of her ears burnt. The doctor asked her what had happened. She says, Well, I was ironing out my work suit and the phone rang, but I mistakenly picked up the iron instead of the phone. The doctor says, Well, that explains one ear, but what about the other? The phone rang again, came the reply. A man was dining alone in a fancy restaurant, and there was a gorgeous redhead sitting at the next table. He had been checking her out since he sat down, but lacked the nerve to talk with her. Suddenly she sneezed, and her glass eye came flying out of its socket towards the man. He reflexively reached out, grabbed it out of the air, and handed it back. Oh my, I am so sorry, the woman said as she popped her eye back in place. Let me buy your dinner to make it up to you. They enjoyed a wonderful dinner together, and afterwards they went to the theater followed by drinks. They talked, they laughed. She shared her deepest dreams, and he shared his. She listened to him with interest. After paying for everything, she asked him if he would like to come to her place for a nightcap and stay for breakfast. They had a wonderful, wonderful time. The next morning, she cooked a gourmet meal with all the trimmings. The guy was amazed. Everything had been so incredible. You know, he said, you are the perfect woman. Are you this nice to every guy you meet? No, she replies. You just happened to catch my eye. Two psychiatrists were at a convention. As they conversed over a drink, one asked, What was your most difficult case? The other replied, I had a patient who lived in a pure fantasy world. He believed that an uncle in South America was going to die and leave him a fortune. All day long he waited for a letter to arrive from an attorney. He never went out. He never did anything. He merely sat around and waited for this fantasy letter from this fantasy uncle. I worked with this man for 8 years. What was the result? It was an 8-year struggle. Every day for 8 years. But I finally cured him. And then that stupid letter arrived. 3 sisters, ages 92, 94, and 96, live in a house together. One night, the 96-year-old draws a bath. She puts one foot in a pauses. She yells down the stairs, "Was I getting in or out of the bath?" The 94-year-old yells back, "I don't know. I'll come up and see." She starts up the stairs and pauses. Then she yells out, "Was I going up the stairs or down?" The 92-year-old is sitting at the kitchen table having tea and listening to her sisters. She shakes her head and says, "I sure hope I never get that forgetful." She knocks on wood for good measure. She then replies, "I'll come up and help both of you as soon as I see who's at the door." 2 men are walking down the street when a dog that's foaming at the mouth viciously bites one of them, then runs off. "Oh my God!" cries the other man. "That dog must have rabies." "Rabies?" says the bitten man. Looking frightened and shaky, he takes a notepad and a pen out of his pocket and starts to scribble something down. "Wait," says his friend. "We can get you tested and vaccinated for rabies if we go to the hospital right now. You don't have to start writing your will." "It's not a will," the bitten man says with an evil grin. "It's a list of people I hate that I want to bite." After an amazing love with his girlfriend, Kevin remembered he had a dentist appointment. He was afraid that the dentist would smell pussy on his breath, so he brushed his teeth 7 times, and on top of that, 2 liters of mouthwash. As he arrived at the dentist, he chewed 5 strong mints, too. The dentist told him to take a seat. Feeling confident and relaxed, he opened his mouth wide. The dentist got close enough and said, "Man, did you have a love before you came here?" Kevin, shocked, says, "Why, no. Does my breath smell like p-?" The dentist says, "No, but your forehead smells like ass." The local news station was interviewing an 80-year-old lady who had just gotten married for the 4th time. The reporter asked her about her life, how it felt to be marrying again at 80, and finally about her new husband's occupation. "He's a funeral director," she said with a grin. "Interesting," the reporter replied. Then he leaned in and asked, "Would you mind telling us a little about your first 3 husbands?" The old lady paused, thought for a moment, and smiled as she began. "Well, when I was in my 20s, I married a banker. In my 40s, I married a circus ringmaster. In my 60s, I married a preacher. And now in my 80s, a funeral director." The reporter was amazed. 4 men with such different careers. Why? The lady chuckled and said, "I married 1 for the money, 2 for the show, 3 to get ready, and 4 to go." 3 men were discussing aging at the nursing home. "60 is the worst age to be," said the 60-year-old. "You always feel like you have to pee, and most of the time, you stand at the toilet and nothing comes out." "Ah, that's nothing," said the 70-year-old. "When you're 70, you can't even crap anymore. You take laxatives, eat bran, you sit on the toilet all day and nothing comes out." "Actually," said the 80-year-old, 80 is the worst age of all." "Do you have trouble peeing too?" asked the 60-year-old. "No, not really. I pee every morning at 6 o'clock. I pee like a racehorse on a flat rock. No problem at all." "Do you have trouble crapping?" "No, I crap every morning at 6:30. With great exasperation, the 60-year-old said, "Let me get this straight. You pee every morning at 6 o'clock and crap every morning at 6:30. So what's so tough about being 80? "I don't wake up until 7 o'clock. A journalist asked Tim Cook why iPhones are so expensive. "Well," said Tim Cook, "that's because the iPhone replaces a whole bunch of devices. A phone, a camera, a watch, a music player, a video player, a PDA, a voice recorder, a GPS navigator, a flashlight, a calculator, a portable gaming console, and many other things. Surely a high price is worth paying to replace so many devices." Then why are androids so much cheaper? Asked the journalist. Because, said Tim Cook, an android replaces just one device, the iPhone. Little Johnny was doing his maths homework. He says out loud, 1 plus 6, that son of a bitch is 7. 4 plus 4, that son of a bitch is 8. His mom overhears this and is shocked. She says to him, "What on earth are you doing, Johnny?" Johnny replies, "I am just doing my maths homework." "And is this how your teacher taught you to do it?" the mother asks. "Yes," Johnny replies. The mother, now furious, immediately phones Johnny's teacher. "What in the world are you teaching my son in class?" The teacher replies, "Right now, we are learning mathematical addition." The mother asks, "And are you seriously teaching them to say 1 plus 6, that son of a bitch is 7? After laughing uncontrollably, the teacher finally answers, "No, ma'am. What I taught them to say was 1 plus 6, the sum of which is 7. A bus stops and 2 Italian men get on. They sit down and start chatting loudly in broken English. A lady sitting behind them isn't paying attention at first, but then she overhears one of the men say, "Emma come first, den I come, den 2 asses come together, I come again, 2 asses, they come together again, I come again and pee twice, then I come one last a time." The lady's eyes go wide. She jumps up and yells, "Excuse me, in this country we do not discuss such filthy private matters in public." The Italian man looks confused and waves his hands. "Lady, relax, I'm only telling my friend how to spell Mississippi." People often complain about the police, but you rarely hear about the positive things they do, such as this incident involving a biker and a frozen carburetor. Last year, on a bitterly cold winter's day, a motorcycle cop on patrol came upon a motorcyclist who was stalled by the roadside. The biker was swathed in heavy protective clothing and wearing a full-face helmet to protect the face from the cold weather. "What's the matter?" asked the cop. "Carburetor's frozen," was the terse reply. "Piss on it. That'll thaw it out." "I can't," said the biker. "Okay, watch me closely and I'll show you." The cop unzipped and promptly warmed the carburetor as promised. Moments later, the bike started, and the rider drove off, waving. A few days later, the local police station received a note of thanks from the father of the motorcyclist. It began, "On behalf of my daughter, Jill." A man owned a small ranch in Montana. One day, the labor department got a tip that he wasn't paying proper wages to his employees, so they sent an investigator to find out what's going on. "Please tell me how many employees you have and how much you pay them," the investigator asked the rancher. The rancher replied, "My ranch hand has been with me 3 years, and I pay him $1,200 per week plus a free room and board. The cook has been here a year, and I pay him $1,000 per week plus a free room and board. And there is a half-wit. He works 18 hours a day with no days off, doing about 90% of the work around here. He makes about $10 per week and pays for his own room and board, although I buy him a bottle of bourbon every Saturday night. He also sleeps with my wife occasionally." The investigator said, "Uh-huh. That's the fool I demand to speak with." The rancher replied, "You're speaking to him." The scene was the nursing home, as old Doug was nearing his last few breaths. His nurse, his wife, his daughter, and 2 sons are with him. He asks for 2 witnesses to be present and a camcorder be in place to record his last wishes, and when all is ready, he begins to speak. "My son, Bernie, I want you to take the Mayfair houses. My daughter, Sybil, you take the apartments over in the East End. My son, Jamie, I want you to take over the offices in the city center. Sarah, my dear wife, please take all the residential buildings on the banks of the river." The nurse and witnesses are blown away as they did not realize his extensive holdings. As old Doug slips away, the nurse says, "Mrs. Smith, your husband must have been such a hard-working man to have accumulated all this property." His wife replies, "Property? The old bugger had a paper route. Betty was a little old lady who was always cheerful and quite happy with her life. But lately, she had started having a bit of a problem. One day, she goes to the doctor and says, "I have this problem with gas, but it really doesn't bother me too much. My farts never smell and are always silent." The doctor replies, "Is that so?" Betty continues, "Yes, as a matter of fact, I've farted at least 20 times since I've been here in your office." "You didn't know I was farting because they don't smell and are silent." The doctor says, "I see. Take these pills and come back to see me next week." Betty goes home and takes her pills as prescribed, and suddenly she starts seeing some big changes in her everyday life. The next week, Betty goes back to the doctor. "Doctor," she says, "I don't know what you gave me, but now my farts, although still silent, stink terribly." The doctor nods and says, "Good. Now that we've cleared up your sinuses, let's work on your hearing." Two old retirees decide to take a trip down memory lane. They return to the town where they first met, strolling through familiar places and eventually sitting at a cozy street cafe. The old man looks at his wife and says with a cheeky grin, "Remember the first time we met right here? We left this cafe, went behind that factory, and I gave you one from the back." The old lady blushes and replies, "Oh, I remember it well." He smiles and says, "Let's do it again, for old time's sake." They pay their bill and walk off together. Nearby, a curious young guy who overheard everything decides to follow them, just for laughs. Behind the factory, he spots the old couple. The woman lifts her skirt, the man drops his trousers, she grabs the fence, and what follows leaves the young man speechless. For the next 40 minutes, it's senior gymnastics on a whole other level. Arms flailing, motion blur, synchronized chaos, like an Olympic event. Then silence. Total collapse. After an hour, the two get up and start dressing like nothing happened. The stunned onlooker walks over and asks, "Sir, I've never seen exercise like that before, especially not from someone your age. What's your secret? Could you move like that 50 years ago?" The old man chuckles. "50 years ago, son, that fence wasn't electric." Little Johnny had the worst mouth in his first grade class. Every teacher at school knew he could turn any word into trouble. One day, his teacher began an alphabet lesson. "Class," she said, "who can give me a word that starts with the letter A?" Johnny's hand shot up. The teacher thought, "Oh no, I know he'll say something awful," so she picked someone else. "Billy, how about you?" "Apple," said Billy. "Very good. Apple starts with A." Next, the teacher said, "Who can give me a word that starts with the letter B?" Johnny waved both hands this time. Again, the teacher ignored him. "Susie?" "Ball," Susie said. "A big red one." "Great job. And a bonus B with big. Gold star for you." This went on for the entire alphabet. Every letter, little Johnny raised his hand. And every time, the teacher picked someone else, expecting trouble. Finally, she reached the letter R. Only Johnny raised his hand. The teacher thought, I can't think of any bad words that start with R. Maybe he's finally behaving. "All right, Johnny," she said cautiously. "Can you give us a clean word that starts with R?" Johnny stood up proudly and shouted, "Rats!" The class gasped in relief. Then he added, "Big, ugly rats with giant teeth and nasty attitudes who wear sunglasses and ride motorcycles into the classroom." The teacher sighed. "Well, I guess that technically counts." After the birth of their 9th child, a redneck couple finally decided enough was enough. "We can't afford a bigger bed," said the husband. "Something's got to give." So he went to the local veterinarian and said, "Doc, I need to be snipped. Me and my cousin don't want no more young'uns." The vet raised an eyebrow but replied, "Well, I could give you a proper vasectomy, but it's expensive." Then he leaned in and said, "There is a cheaper method, though. Go home, find yourself a cherry bomb, light it, stuff it into an empty beer can, then hold the can up to your ear and count to 10. The redneck blinked. "Now hold on, I ain't no rocket surgeon." "But how's that supposed to help?" "Trust me," said the vet, "you'll never have another kid again." So the man went home, cracked open a beer, drank it, dropped a lit cherry bomb into the empty can, and followed the instructions. He held the can up to his ear and began counting. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Then he paused, thought for a second, put the can between his legs, and started counting on his other hand. A highway patrol officer was sitting in his car on the shoulder, radar ready, when a car crawled past doing exactly 22 miles per hour. He blinked. "Now that's just as dangerous as speeding," he muttered, flipping on his lights. He pulled the car over and walked up to the driver's side window. Inside were 6 elderly ladies, 2 in the front, 2 in the back, and 2 squished in the middle, all looking absolutely petrified, their eyes wide like they'd just seen a ghost. The woman behind the wheel rolled down her window and smiled sweetly. "Good afternoon, officer. Was I speeding?" "Not quite," he replied. "But driving far below the speed limit can be just as risky. May I ask why you were going 22 miles an hour?" She looked confused. "Well, that's what the sign said. Route 22. The officer stifled a laugh. "Ma'am, that's the route number, not the speed limit." Her cheeks flushed pink. "Oh dear," she said. "That explains a lot." He nodded and glanced inside the vehicle again. "I have to ask, are your passengers all right? They look like they've seen a ghost." The driver leaned over and whispered, "They'll be fine in a minute, officer. We just got off Route 142.